The ZACK Files. Dr. Jekyll, Orthodontist. By Dan Greenberg. Illustrated by Jack E. Davis. Chapter 1. My name is ZACK. I'm a pretty normal kid. But weird things happen to me all the time. If a weird thing has a choice of happening to me or to somebody else, it always picks me. I don't know why. Like one time a ghost named Wanda trashed our apartment. Another time I got an electric shock in science class and for a while I could read everybody's mind. Also, about the best way to get to the parallel universe next to ours is through the medicine cabinet in my bathroom. Well, you get the idea. Anyway, you might not think that going to an orthodontist would lead to a weird and scary adventure. But you'd be wrong. The time I want to tell you about started out normal enough. I went to the orthodontist because I had to have a baby tooth pulled. I wasn't too thrilled about that. But my dad said we'd go for chocolate milkshakes afterward. So that was something. My mom and dad are divorced, by the way. I spend half the time with each of them. My dad is a writer, and he works at home. So he's the one who takes me to stuff like orthodontists and milkshakes. Dad and I were sitting in the waiting room. My old orthodontist, Dr. Silver, had retired. Now there was a new guy named Dr. Sheldon Jekyll. I knew because he sent me a card with a smiley face on it. It was the first smiley face I'd seen with teeth in it. Very straight teeth. When I first heard Dr. Jekyll's name, I got a little spooked. There's this really scary book called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's by Stephen Lewis Robertson. Or maybe it's Robert Louis Stevenson. Anyway, it's somebody like that. Maybe you've read it. It's about this nice doctor who turns into a monster named Edward Hyde. It happens every time he drinks some kind of potion. I joked with my dad about it. He said it was just a made-up story. And things like that don't happen in real life. He always says stuff like that. But I know better. While Dad and I were sitting in the waiting room, I noticed this much older girl. She was about 13. I'm 10. She smiled at me. Boy, were her teeth straight. They reminded me of Dr. Jekyll's smiley face card. I guess going to an orthodontist was really working for her. Just then the nurse told me to go in. Do you want me to go in with you? Asked my dad. No, I said. Why? Well, in case you were scared about having your tooth out. Or because you haven't met Dr. Jekyll before. Oh, I said. I did sort of want Dad to come in with me. But I didn't want to look like a big baby in front of that girl. I think I'd like to go in alone, Dad, I said. Okay, said Dad. He gave me a squeeze. I went in to meet Dr. Jekyll. Well, Dr. Jekyll wasn't at all scary look ing. He had black hair combed straight back. He seemed really jolly. And he had a big smile. I mean, we're talking wall-to-wall teeth. Hello, he said. Glad to meet you, ZACK. Glad to meet you. I'm sure we'll get along just fine. And I promise not to pull the wrong tooth. Ha, ha. That was a little joke. I smiled weakly. Then we shook hands. His hand was sweaty. He seemed a little fidgety. Well, I was a little fidgety myself. But I was the one having the tooth pulled. I don't know what his excuse was. Well, sit down, ZACK. Sit down, said Dr. Jekyll. He rubbed his hands together. Like he was eager to get to work. Right in that chair there. That's right. Let me look at that tooth now. Open wide. Open wider. Aha. Yes. I see the little devil. Ha, ha. We can't have you making Zack's grown-up tooth grow in crooked, now, can we? We're going to have to yank you out of there, you little devil, aren't we? Ha, ha. Okay. Calling my tooth a little devil was a tiny bit weird. Talking to a tooth at all was weird. I admit that. But otherwise, I thought he seemed pretty normal. Zack, said Dr. Jekyll, rubbing his hands some more, I'm going to give you nitrous oxide. Do you know what that is? Laughing gas? I said. Exactly, he said. Have you ever had nitrous oxide before? No, sir, I said. Well, I think you'll like it, he said. He placed a mask over my nose. A long tube connected it to a tank of gas on the floor. He turned it on. I heard a hissing sound. At first I didn't feel anything. Then I began to get dizzy. And then my head seemed to get very light. Just like a helium balloon. I felt if I didn't hold on to it, my head would float right up to the ceiling. I could see it. My head was a helium balloon. Floating on the ceiling. Suddenly that seemed the funniest thing I had ever thought of. I started to giggle. Dr. Jekyll giggled, too. I laughed hysterically. So did Dr. Jekyll. Then he took a pair of pliers and pulled my tooth. I thought that was funny, too. Dr. Jekyll must have thought it was even funnier than I did. He was laughing so hard, his face got red. Then it got purple. Then his eyes sort of bulged out and got wild-looking. I thought he might be having a heart attack. And for some reason I thought that was funny, too. He started staggering around the office. He looked like one of the Three Stooges. I was laughing so hard I was almost choking. Then, and I'm not sure about this, it seemed his hair grew longer. And his teeth were growing, too. Long and crooked. Like fangs. I was laughing so hard, I was gasping. Dr. Jekyll wasn't laughing anymore. He was growling. Oh, no, he shouted. It's happening again. I can't believe it. I can't stop it. Erg. Erg. Chapter 2. Dr. Jekyll kept staggering all over the office. His hair was wild and crazy looking. He started toward me, the pliers still in his hand. It looked like he was getting ready to pull another tooth. Oh, no. Help. I shouted. Get me out of here. But I was still laughing. It was the weirdest feeling I've ever had. Being scared to death and being unable to stop laughing. Dr. Jekyll came closer. I couldn't my arms or legs. It felt like I was strapped into the chair. All of a sudden Dr. Jekyll lurched to a stop. What am I doing? He cried. I must stop this. He grabbed a bottle off a shelf. He tore off the top. He gulped it down. A second later Dr. Jekyll stopped growl-ing. He stopped staggering around. His hair lay back down on his head. His teeth grew back into his mouth. His face went from purple to red. Then from red to pink. He cleared his throat. He patted his hair. He looked nervously at me and smiled. Nice straight TV ad teeth again. He took the gas mask off my face. Well, now, he said. How do we feel? I can only speak for myself, I said. And how do you feel? Okay, I guess, I said. I was telling a huge fib. I didn't really feel okay at all. I just said that in case Dr. Jekyll was getting ready to go berserk on me again. I was pretty shaken up, if you want to know the truth. My old orthodontist, Dr. Silver, hardly ever went berserk on me. Dr. Jekyll was putting a wad of cotton into my mouth. Then he put the pulled tooth in a tiny blue plastic box that was supposed to look like a treasure chest. That little devil is right in here now, where he belongs, said Dr. Jekyll. He handed me the little plastic treasure chest. The laughing gas had worn off by now. I started to wonder. Had I really seen what I thought I saw? Or was it just some kind of crazy dream? Maybe it was something the laughing gas did to me. But it had all seemed so real. Dr. Jekyll handed me a little paper cup. What's this? I asked. It's just mouthwash, he said. Miracle. Mouthwash. It's truly yummy. I invented it. Try it. I tried it. It did taste pretty good. Sort of like bubble gum. And a little bit like peanut butter and chocolate. I swished some around in my mouth. I spit it out in the spit bowl. Don't spit, shouted Dr. Jekyll. Don't spit. Oh, I thought. Here we go again. Then, in a much calmer voice, he said, "This is special mouthwash, ZACK. It's all right to drink it." Really? I said. I took another cup and swallowed it down. No dentist has ever told me I could drink mouthwash before. Well, ZACK, I'm not like other dentists, he said. Boy, you can say that again, I thought. Chapter 3. I waited till we were out of the office and in the coffee shop before I told Dad what happened. I looked around to make sure nobody could hear me. Dad, what would you say if I told you that when I was in Dr. Jekyll's office he turned into a monster? Dad chuckled. I'd say you had a great imagination, he said. Dad was having a chocolate milkshake, too. Part of it was on his upper lip, like a mustache. Yeah, but that's what really happened, I said. I think. What are you talking about? A man and woman sat down in a booth behind me. I leaned in close to Dad and whispered. Dad, I said, right after Dr. Jekyll pulled my tooth, he started changing. His face turned purple. His hair grew wild. His teeth grew long and crooked. He started growling. And he said something about how it was happening again and how he couldn't stop it. Dad looked at me to see if I was putting him on. I wasn't. And then what? He asked. And then he drank some stuff out of a bottle. And he calmed right down again, I said. Dad was looking at me strangely. I slurped up some of my milkshake. It tasted really good. Even better than Dr. Jekyll's mouthwash. And this happened when? Dad asked. Well, let's see. He gave me the laughing gas and I went no further. Dad was nodding and smiling. He seemed relieved. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. No more mustache. You've never had nitrous oxide before, have you? He said. No, but I think it was just the gas, he said. First time and all. Well, it was certainly possible. Maybe you're right, I said. I doubt you'll ever experience anything like that again, he said. As long as you live. Dad had no idea how wrong he was. Chapter 4. When I woke up the next morning, my mouth hurt where my tooth was pulled. I went into the bathroom. I pulled my lip way down and peered into the mirror. The hole looked fine. But the teeth next to it looked funny. I thought they looked more crooked. But how could that be? Probably